What if I told you some of the most talented NFL teams of the last 20 years never even made the playoffs? This isn't just about bad records. It's about epic collapses, Super Bowl dreams, MVPs, blockbuster trades, all turning into chaos, injuries, locker room fights, and coaches getting fired mid-season. From the Dream Team Eagles to the $245 million Broncos disaster, we're breaking down every disappointing NFL season in the past 2 decades in just 30 minutes. So buckle up, because some of these teams didn't just fall short, they fell apart. Dream team that drowned. 2011 Philadelphia Eagles. The 2011 Eagles didn't just believe they were good, they believed they were inevitable. Fresh off a playoff appearance and armed with cap space, they went shopping like it was Black Friday. Nnamdi Asomugha, the top free agent cornerback, was the crown jewel. They brought in Jason Babin, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, and re-signed Michael Vick to a $100 million deal. But the real quote that cursed it all? Dream Team. 2 words from backup quarterback Vince Young that turned a loaded roster into a walking meme. On paper, this team looked terrifying. They had playmakers everywhere. LaShawn McCoy in his prime, Deshaun Jackson, torching secondaries, Jeremy Maclin, and a defensive front that could really get after the quarterback. But the problem started before the first snap. Head coach Andy Reid made the strange choice to name Juan Castillo, a former offensive line coach, as defensive coordinator. The defense played like it was coached by someone learning on the job, because it was. The Eagles opened the season 1-4. They blew fourth quarter leads like it was a tradition. Close losses, missed assignments, and clock management disasters became routine. Vic looked nothing like the electric MVP candidate from 2010. He was inconsistent, banged up, and by mid-season, the team's confidence was completely gone. The fans were stunned. Philly radio stations tore into the coaching staff. Former players called it embarrassing. A Reddit thread from the time just read, "This team has too many stars and not enough leaders." They finished 8-8, exactly, .500, the most expensive mediocrity in the league. In the end, the Dream Team became a nightmare no Eagles fan wants to relive. It wasn't just that they lost, it was how loudly they failed. And that makes the next collapse even more painful, because the 2022 Denver Broncos weren't just supposed to be good, they were supposed to be fixed. The $245 million meltdown. 2022 Denver Broncos. When the Broncos traded for Russell Wilson, it felt like the curse was over. They had everything else: a top-tier defense, young receivers in Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, and a fan base desperate to escape quarterback purgatory. Add in new head coach Nathaniel Hackett, who came from the Aaron Rodgers tree in Green Bay, and the hype train was off the rails. The front office didn't wait to see if Russ would fit. They handed him $245 million before he threw a pass. What followed was some of the worst defense in NFL history. Seriously, Denver finished last in scoring. Russ looked lost. Hackett couldn't manage the clock, and games were so painful that fans were literally counting down the play clock out loud. Sidelines got ugly. In Week 16, backup quarterback Brett Rypien had to yell at the offensive line to protect Russ. The lowlight reel was endless. A Christmas Day blowout by the Rams, Hackett getting fired before the season ended, and fans sarcastically chanting, "Let's ride," after every failed drive. Quotes were brutal. NFL analyst Ryan Clark said, "This is the worst coach team I've ever seen." Social media dragged them weekly. Wilson's image went from polished leader to cringy meme. And the Broncos didn't just lose. They wasted one of the best defenses in the league. When it was over, Denver sat at 5-12. Hackett was gone. Wilson's confidence and maybe his career was in question. And somehow, the team felt farther from contention than before he arrived. It was a disaster that felt surreal, and it made Cowboys fans feel something familiar, because back in 2008, Dallas also had everything except direction. The curse of hard knocks. 2008 Dallas Cowboys. The 2008 Cowboys were the definition of star power. You had Tony Romo, Terrell Owens, DeMarcus Ware, and even Pac-Man Jones added to the mix. They were fresh off a 13-3 season. They were on hard knocks. This was supposed to be the year, but even before the season began, cracks started to show. T.O. was upset with how close Romo was to Jason Witten. He felt iced out of the offense. Romo took a vacation with Jessica Simpson during the bye week, and fans were furious. The locker room was turning toxic fast. Head coach Wade Phillips didn't have control. Players did what they wanted. Accountability was nowhere to be found. They lost big games down the stretch, including a Week 17 loss to the Eagles, 44-6, to miss the playoffs. That's not a typo. 44-6. Cowboys fans fans were livid. ESPN's Ed Werder reported complete dysfunction. The quote that summed it up came from T.O. himself. "I've got my popcorn ready, but I ain't playing second fiddle. The talent was real, but the leadership wasn't." And just like that, a Super Bowl roster fell flat. Speaking of MVPs and crash landings, it's hard to forget what happened to Cam Newton and the 2016 Panthers. From league darlings to total collapse in less than a year. The self-destructing Super Bowl hangover. 2016 Carolina Panthers. The last time we saw Cam Newton before the 2016 season, he was walking off the Super Bowl 50 podium, head down, hoodie pulled tight, silent. The Panthers had just lost to the Denver Broncos, a game defined by defensive domination, turnovers, and a brutal beating of the league's most electric quarterback. But even then, nobody expected what was coming next. Carolina entered 2016 with sky-high expectations. They had gone 15-1 the year before. Cam was the reigning MVP, dabbing, smiling, and dragging defenders for first downs like a one-man show. The offense was creative. The defense was nasty. They had swagger, unity, real juice. For fans, it felt like a dynasty was just getting started. And then just like that, it cracked. It started quietly with a contract dispute. Star cornerback Josh Norman, one of the key voices and playmakers on that 2015 defense, was let go after negotiations fell apart. He was gone to Washington. The secondary immediately felt it, and the cracks became visible fast. The offensive line, already shaky in 2015, got worse, much worse. Cam started taking hits early and often. Defenses came after him like they were punishing him for his MVP season. Helmet to helmet, blindside sacks, late hits. He was never protected. He didn't look like Superman anymore. He looked human and tired and frustrated. By week 5, they were 1-4. The offense sputtered. The defense was giving up deep plays. The spark was gone. And Cam, his attitude started to shift. He clashed with reporters. His iconic post-game fits and fashion, once fun and flashy, started feeling like distractions rather than statements. The joy was gone. He was still talent, but it was like watching a fighter take too many punches and lose his edge. There were fights in practice, rumors of tension between position groups. The body language told the story. A team that knew it wasn't right and couldn't fix it. They finished the season 6-10, a massive fall from their NFC championship just a year prior. No playoffs, no rhythm, just confusion, injuries, and frustration. Everything that made the 2015 team fun had disappeared. One fan on Twitter said it best. "It's like watching a reboot of a movie you love, and they changed everything that made it good." Cam Newton was never quite the same. He had flashes in later seasons, but that MVP version, it never returned. The physical toll of 2016 left its mark on his body and his career, and the Panthers never really recovered from the emotional toll either. The fall was swift and brutal, and that kind of collapse, when you're that close to a ring, leaves scars. And speaking of endings, the very next team on our list would also crash at the tail end of a once proud run. The 2007 Baltimore Ravens had legends on their roster, but sometimes even the greats can't outrun the end. The sudden death of a dynasty. 2007 Baltimore Ravens. By 2007, the Baltimore Ravens weren't just a team, they were a legacy. Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, Jonathan Ogden, and Steve McNair, one of the toughest quarterbacks of his generation. These were legends, warriors, the kind of players that turned Sunday into a battlefield. After going 13-3 in 2006, the Ravens looked like they were on the cusp of one final push. The defense was still elite. The offense, while aging, had veteran leadership and just enough spark to compete. The team felt like a sleeping giant. If they could just stay healthy, they had one more shot at a ring. Instead, they imploded. It started with Steve McNair, who came into the season already dealing with injuries. He never looked right. His arm was shot. His legs were gone. And by mid-season, he was on the sideline. In his place came Kyle Ballard, a former first-round pick who had already failed once in Baltimore and was not equipped to salvage a veteran team. The offense fell apart. It was slow, predictable, and dead on arrival in the red zone. The Ravens couldn't score, couldn't finish drives, and couldn't protect the football. The defense tried to hold on. Ray Lewis still barked pre-game speeches. Ed Reed still flew around the field, but you could feel it. The magic was gone. Every great defense eventually needs help, and they weren't getting any. Then came the backbreaker. Week 15 against the Miami Dolphins, a team that was 0-13, winless, lifeless, playing for pride, and somehow the Ravens lost in overtime to a team that would finish 1-15. It was the ultimate humiliation. Fans couldn't believe it. One posted on a forum, "We just became someone else's punchline." Another tweeted, "We're the answer to a trivia question now." Great. That loss all but confirmed what everyone already sensed. The run was over. Head coach Brian Billick, once seen as an offensive genius, had completely lost the team. His schemes were outdated, his locker room fractured, and his message no longer hit home. He was fired at the end of the season. The Ravens finished 5-11, and just like that, the dynasty was dead. But sometimes you need a crash to start a rebuild. From the the ashes of 2007 came a new era. John Harbaugh arrived the following year. The team drafted Joe Flacco and running back Ray Rice. They retooled the offense, modernized the defense, and built a squad that would return to glory just a few years later, winning the Super Bowl in 2012. But that redemption doesn't erase what 2007 was: the sudden, painful collapse of a legendary core that couldn't quite make it to the finish line. And from one fallen legacy to another, we go to a team that tasted success, built expectations, and then collapsed under their own hype. The 2017 Oakland Raiders. From NFL sweethearts to national punchline. 2017 Oakland Raiders. The 2016 Oakland Raiders were America's underdog darling. Derek Carr had taken a leap. Their offense was explosive, and they went 12-4 before Carr's broken leg ended their playoff dreams. In 2017, the team ran it back, healthy, confident, and with one major addition. Marshawn Lynch came out of retirement to run through a motherfunner's face. The swagger was back. The fans were ready, but everything fell apart. The issues started early and kept getting louder. Amari Cooper disappeared for long stretches. Michael Crabtree was fighting corners instead of catching touchdowns. Reports started leaking that Carr had lost the locker room, especially after a game where his teammates appeared to let him get hit. There were whispers about a fractured team, one that had believed its own hype a little too early. Head coach Jack Del Rio, who had been the perfect vibe guy during the rise, suddenly looked in over his head. The offense was stale, the play calling was predictable, and the defense was awful. Then the rumors started. John Gruden was returning. Del Rio denied it. Then he was fired immediately after the final game while talking to the media. They finished 6-10. A team that felt like the future of the league became a punchline within months. A Reddit thread summed it up. We went from gangsters to a garage band in a single season. The only thing louder than the hype was the crash. And if you thought that was a meltdown, let's talk about the 2019 Cleveland Browns, a team that had never had expectations until suddenly they had all of them. The unwatchables. 2019 Cleveland Browns. Nobody does off-season hype like the Cleveland Browns did in 2019. After years of being the league's punchline, they had found their guy in Baker Mayfield, and they weren't being quiet about it. The team added Odell Beckham Jr., paired him with Jarvis Landry, and already had rising stars like Nick Chubb, Myles Garrett, and Denzel Ward. They were on magazine covers, talking playoffs, maybe even more. The problem? They believed the hype more than they built the team. Head coach Freddie Kitchens had no experience managing egos or game plans. The offense was disorganized, play calling was inconsistent, and the team was penalized constantly. It looked like a Madden team without a coach. Then came the turning point. Myles Garrett swinging a helmet at Mason Rudolph on national television. The team unraveled after that. Baker regressed hard, throwing 21 interceptions. OBJ never found chemistry with him. The offensive line collapsed. And Kitchens, he was fired before Black Monday even started. They finished 6-10. The preseason favorites became the league's most frustrating team. One fan on Twitter said, "We were a Ferrari with a clown driving it." The Browns went from hopeful to hopeless in 4 months. And speaking of hopeless, that word defined the 2011 Jets, who went from back-to-back AFC title games to locker room implosion. The great New York letdown. 2011 New York Jets. In 2009 and 2010, the New York Jets felt like a throwback. Tough defense, loudmouth coach, smashmouth football. Rex Ryan guaranteed a Super Bowl before the 2011 season even started. It wasn't a question of if. They truly believed this was the year they'd finally get one. But instead of a parade, they got chaos. The locker room turned toxic. Santonio Holmes, named a team captain, clashed with the offense, publicly criticized teammates, and was benched mid-game by season's end. Mark Sanchez regressed badly, throwing 18 interceptions and struggling under the pressure. The defense, still solid, but even Darrelle Revis couldn't save this offense. They ended the year 8-8, but it felt worse. The team missed the playoffs, and the culture that Rex built started to crumble. He lost the locker room. "We don't have leaders," one anonymous player told the media. "We have chaos." And it didn't stop there. The Jets would go a full 12 seasons without returning to the playoffs after this year. The 2011 collapse wasn't just a failed season. It was the moment the swagger turned into sadness. And while the Jets were collapsing from within, another team was dealing with everything falling apart, from the coach's health to the quarterback's injuries. That would be the 2016 Minnesota Vikings. The regression of the MVP. 2016 Minnesota Vikings. The 2016 Minnesota Vikings were the NFL's 5-week Cinderella, and then just as quickly, they turned back into a pumpkin. They started the year 5-0, not just winning, dominating. The defense looked terrifying. Mike Zimmer had them flying around like a pack of wolves. Everson Griffin was living in the backfield. Xavier Rhodes was locking down entire sides of the field. And the offense, functional, efficient, solid. which was more than enough. That offense was led by Sam Bradford, who had arrived just weeks before the season started after Teddy Bridgewater suffered a devastating knee injury in practice. It was a panic trade, but early on, it looked brilliant. Bradford was sharp, calm, and surprisingly accurate. He even earned a nickname in Minnesota, Sammy Sleeves. For a few weeks, everything clicked, but football has a way of showing you your limits, especially when the injuries start stacking up. And in 2016, the Vikings got decimated. By mid-season, 4 offensive linemen were out with season-ending injuries. The replacements were overmatched. Bradford, never known for mobility, had no chance. He was sacked 37 times that year, hit even more. The run game evaporated. They finished dead last in rushing yards per attempt. At times, it looked like Bradford was throwing from a collapsing pocket made of folding chairs. And then things got even weirder. Mike Zimmer, the heartbeat of that defense, and the team's no-nonsense leader, had to miss a game due to emergency eye surgery. He needed multiple operations and almost lost his vision. It was serious, and it rocked the team. With their head coach literally out of the building and their offense falling apart, the emotional weight started to show. The Vikings weren't just losing games, they were falling apart, one piece at a time. Locker room tension surfaced. Reports leaked that offensive and defensive players were pointing fingers. The early season swagger disappeared. Bradford's stats dipped. The defense, once dominant, started giving up fourth quarter leads. That fast, physical team from September was now limping through December. They went from 5-0 to 8-8, missing the playoffs entirely. A season that started with Super Bowl buzz ended in disappointment. Zimmer later said, "It just got away from us." And that was the truth. Not one moment broke the Vikings. The collapse came slowly, painfully, like watching a beautiful house collapse one beam at a time. Bridgewater never returned to full form. Bradford didn't stick. And by 2017, it was Case Keenum's turn to ride the quarterback carousel. The 2016 Vikings weren't the worst team. Far from it. But they're one of the best examples of how fast a promising season can unravel when the wrong pieces break. And if you want to talk about sudden collapses, the next team didn't just fall. They crashed face first into rock bottom. A team built on defense, hype, and one last shot at glory. The 2018 Jacksonville Jaguars. Too talented to fail. 2018 Jacksonville Jaguars. The 2017 Jaguars were one of the NFL's best stories. They had the league's top defense. They went into Foxborough in the AFC Championship game and almost took down Tom Brady. They were young, fearless, and ready for more. The belief was real. Blake Bortles could manage the game, and the defense would take care of the rest. Instead, 2018 became the blueprint for how quickly it can all fall apart. Bortles regressed hard. His mechanics crumbled. His confidence vanished. And by mid-season, he was benched. The offense had no identity. Injuries piled up, and frustration set in. The defense, once elite, couldn't carry the whole team. Again, Jalen Ramsey was frustrated. Calais Campbell tried to keep things together, but locker room drama spilled into the media. One report said the team couldn't stand each other by November. They finished 6-10. The window was slammed shut before it ever really opened. Bortles was cut. The core started to splinter, and the Jaguars haven't sniffed that level of success since. From almost making the Super Bowl to missing the playoffs entirely, this team might have had the fastest rise and fall in recent NFL memory. The most punchable team in football. 2015 Philadelphia Eagles. The 2015 Eagles were a science experiment gone wrong. This was the year Chip Kelly took full control, not just as head coach, but as general manager. And from day one, it felt like he was trying to erase everything the previous regime had built. First, he shipped off LaShawn McCoy, the franchise's all-time leading rusher. Then he brought in DeMarco Murray, fresh off leading the league in rushing for Dallas. But an awful scheme fit in Chip's shotgun-heavy offense. It only got weirder. He traded Nick Foles for Sam Bradford, a quarterback whose health was always in question. He cut Evan Mathis, a Pro Bowl guard, and the locker room, it never bought in. Kelly's system was all about speed, but his style was robotic, impersonal, and cold. Players didn't love playing for him, and it showed. The offense never found a rhythm. Murray hated the way he was used, often getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage. Bradford was up and down all year. The defense was on the field way too long. The team started 4-7. Kelly's culture beats talent philosophy became a running joke. There were leaks to the media, anonymous players saying the locker room was like walking on eggshells after a 38-24 loss to the Washington football team on national TV. Chip Kelly was fired before Week 17. Owner Jeffrey Lurie didn't even wait for Black Monday. They finished 7-9. Not a total collapse on paper, but emotionally, it was rock bottom. Fans were ready for something new, and Chip's vision of the future had aged like milk. As one Philly fan tweeted, "He traded our soul for speed, and we got neither." And while Chip's chaos ended in Week 16, another team was just getting started on a collapse that would change their entire future. The 2015 Colts, in the year that broke Andrew Luck, the letdown that got Luck hurt. 2015 Indianapolis Colts. If you wanted to know how not to protect a franchise quarterback, just watch the 2015 Indianapolis Colts. Coming off an AFC Championship appearance, the front office decided to go all in, but not on the offensive line. They brought in veterans like Frank Gore and Andre Johnson, adding weapons instead of protection. The plan? Let Andrew Luck do everything. And he tried, but it cost him. Behind one of the worst lines in the league, Luck was sacked, pressured, and hit constantly. Midway through the season, he suffered a lacerated kidney and a partially torn abdominal muscle. He was done, and really, so were the Colts. Veteran Matt Hasselbeck came in and actually won a few games, but the damage was done. Head coach Chuck Pagano and GM Ryan Grigson were in an open power struggle. Reports surfaced that they barely spoke. The team finished 8-8, flat, uninspired, and stuck in neutral. The worst part? This was the year the damage to Luck became irreversible. He was never the same player. And when he suddenly retired in 2019, you could trace the moment it all started back to 2015. Colts fans knew it too. One forum post put it simply, "We ruined the best quarterback we've ever had." And speaking of wasted opportunity, few collapses were as financially doomed or emotionally draining as the 2020 New Orleans Saints. From 13 wins to bottom tier, 2020 New Orleans Saints. The 2020 Saints were the end of a dynasty that never got its ring. Drew Brees was on his final legs. Literally, his arm strength was gone. His ribs were broken, but the team still won 12 games, carried by a top-tier defense and the magic of Alvin Kamara. Everything about that season screamed one last ride. They were $100 million over the cap and had gone all in. There was no backup plan, but in the playoffs, it all came undone. In the divisional round against Tampa Bay, Brees threw 3 interceptions. The Saints were up 20-13 in the third quarter and then just collapsed. Tom Brady took over, the Saints couldn't move the ball, and the dome got quiet. After the game, Brees walked off the field, looking back one last time. He didn't say it publicly that night, but everyone knew it was over. He retired weeks later, and the team, it fell apart. In 2021, they started 4 different quarterbacks. Their cap situation left them gutted. Key players were let go or restructured into confusing deals. The drop was sudden, from Super Bowl contenders to roster purgatory in a year. As Saints fans would say, this was the price of going all in, and it didn't even work. But if 2020 Saints were a slow decline, 2014, Washington was toxic from the jump, and it all centered around a broken quarterback room. Toxic from day one. 2014, Washington. The 2014 Washington football team didn't just have problems. They were the problem. Head coach Jay Gruden inherited a mess, but somehow made it worse. The team had Robert Griffin III, Kirk Cousins, and Colt McCoy, but no clear plan. One week, it was RG3, then Cousins, then McCoy. The locker room was exhausted, and so were the fans. The drama didn't stay behind closed doors either. Gruden publicly criticized RG tweets to the media, at one point saying, "He has a long way to go." Anonymous players told reporters the quarterback had lost the room. The offensive line gave up 58 sacks, and the defense quit on multiple games. The record, 4-12. But the real story was how ugly it felt. The stadium was half empty by December, and when RG Seard was finally benched permanently, it marked the end of an era that had started with so much promise in 2012. Fans didn't even argue anymore. They just shrugged. One tweet said, "This isn't even disappointing. It's expected." And from dysfunction to collapse, the next team we're hitting is one that had stars, stats, and absolutely no identity. The 2021 Seattle Seahawks. The mass hysteria season. 2021 Seattle Seahawks. For a decade, Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson kept the Seahawks relevant. But by 2021, The foundation was cracking. They still had stars: DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Bobby Wagner, but something felt off. Rumors swirled about Russ being unhappy. Reports said he wanted more say in play calling, more protection, more everything. Then came the injury. Wilson's finger got crushed in week 5. He rushed back in 4 weeks, but wasn't the same. He finished with a career-low 6-8 record as a starter. The defense was leaky. The offense had no rhythm. And for the first time in the Carroll era, Seattle just looked bad. The Seahawks ended the season 7-10, their first losing year under Pete. The tension reached a boiling point. Russ posted cryptic tweets. Pete looked exhausted. It was clear this chapter was over. A fan sign at the final home game said, "Thanks for the memories, but it's time." And speaking of time, our final entry takes us to a team that everyone thought had arrived, only to discover they never even belonged. The 2019 Chicago Bears. The Paper Champs Award. 2019 Chicago Bears. The 2018 Bears shocked everyone. 12-4, a top-ranked defense, and a young head coach in Matt Nagy, who looked like the next big thing. Sure, it ended with the double doink, but optimism was sky high heading into 2019. People picked them to win the NFC North. Some said Super Bowl. And then the truth came out. Mitchell Trubisky wasn't it. The offense was unwatchable. Trubisky couldn't read defenses, couldn't hit open receivers, and by mid-season, Bears fans were chanting for Chase Daniel. Nagy's creative playbook went stale fast. Everything looked broken. Meanwhile, the defense, still elite with Khalil Mack, was getting visibly frustrated. They held opponents under 20 points in 8 games. They lost half of those. You could see the air leaving the team week by week. They finished 8-8, missed the playoffs, and it became clear. 2018 was a fluke. One post on Bears Twitter said it best: "We were never back. We just fooled ourselves." And that's the story. 16 seasons, 16 collapses. Not every team that's hyped is ready. Not every star roster wins. And in the NFL, expectations don't just build pressure. They create legends or ruins. 16 teams, 16 total meltdowns. Some had talent, some had hype. None lived up to it. Thanks for watching all the way through. If you felt the heartbreak too, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and drop your most disappointing team in the comments. We've all been there.